Bill O'Reilly sat back in his chair, eyes narrowed, the spotlight from the studio lights bouncing off his brow. The air was thick with anticipation as the audience shifted in their seats, waiting for the next strike. Across from him sat Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, composed, poised, her expression betraying nothing of the intensity rippling beneath the surface. The segment had begun innocuously enough, with questions about policy, legislative gridlock, and the shifting balance of power in Washington. But O'Reilly had never been one to play by the polite rules of conversation. He thrived on disruption, provocation, and the spectacle of conflict. And now, with the cameras rolling and millions watching, he leaned forward with that familiar edge of disdain. "You know, Congresswoman," he began, his tone dripping with condescension, "a lot of people out there don't even know what you've done. I mean, sure, you've made noise on television, given a few fiery speeches, but what's your career really built on? Shouting, anger, seems like performance art more than actual leadership." The words hung in the air like a slap. A ripple of gasps and murmurs ran through the audience. O'Reilly smirked, satisfied that he had landed a blow. He sat back, folding his arms as if daring her to defend herself. Jasmine Crockett, however, didn't flinch. She didn't scramble or stammer. Instead, she let the silence stretch, studying him with an unblinking gaze. The quiet became almost unbearable, the audience leaning forward, the producers in the booth wondering if she'd falter. Then, with deliberate calm, she placed her hand on the desk and spoke. "You know, Bill," she said, her voice steady but laced with fire, "I'm not surprised you'd confuse passion with performance. For years, you've made a career out of yelling at people, talking over women, and reducing serious conversations to entertainment clips. You insult people for ratings. I fight for people's lives." The audience erupted in applause, clapping and cheering, but she held up her hand, commanding their attention back. "You want to talk about careers? Let's do that. Before I ever stepped foot in Congress, I was a public defender. I defended people who couldn't afford the luxury of someone like you sitting in an office studio, getting paid millions to insult them. I stood by people who were chewed up by a system designed to forget them. My career has been about making sure the voiceless have a voice. Can you say the same, Bill?" O'Reilly's smirk faltered. He leaned forward, interjecting with that trademark growl. "Oh, come on, spare me the dramatics. Defending criminals isn't exactly heroic." But Crockett didn't miss a beat. Her eyes flashed, and her words came sharp as a blade. "Defending the Constitution is heroic. Defending the right to counsel, the right to due process, the right to fairness, those things matter. And the fact that you dismiss it as defending criminals tells me everything I need to know about how little you respect justice. You've built your name tearing down people who can't fight back. I've built mine by standing up for them. That's not just a career, Bill. That's a calling." The audience, once again, erupted, louder this time. Some even rose to their feet, clapping and whistling, as the weight of her words settled in the room. O'Reilly's face flushed. He tried to interrupt, to regain control. "This isn't a courtroom, Congresswoman, this is reality." But Jasmine cut him off, her voice rising with authority that commanded the entire space. "Reality. The reality is that people like you profit off division while people like me are in the trenches trying to fix it. You sit here and question my career, but what's yours, Bill? A series of books and rants designed to make people angrier at each other than they were yesterday. That may be profitable, but it's not leadership. And it's certainly not service." For a moment, the studio was electric. The audience's energy was palpable, a mix of shock, admiration, and exhilaration. The producers didn't even bother to signal a commercial break, they knew they had lightning on screen. Bill, visibly agitated, tried to pivot. "You think you've got all the answers, don't you? You stand there with your moral high ground, but your so-called solutions don't work. You scream about justice, but what have you actually changed? What law have you passed that's changed lives?" This was supposed to be his winning shot, the kind of challenge that cornered guests into defensive rambling. But Crockett only smiled faintly, her composure unshaken. "You want specifics, Bill. Let's talk specifics. I've co-sponsored legislation to expand healthcare access, fought for criminal justice reform, and worked to increase federal resources for underfunded schools. Those aren't soundbites. Those are policies. Real changes that impact real lives. But even beyond legislation, do you know what leadership looks like? It looks like showing up, listening, being there for the people who sent me to represent them. When was the last time you showed up for anyone other than yourself? The crowd went wild. Cheers echoed through the studio, and even some of the crew members were nodding. O'Reilly's jaw tightened. "Congresswoman, you're very good at speeches," he said, his tone sharper now. "But speeches don't solve problems. Neither does insulting people on TV," Crockett shot back instantly. The audience howled, laughter mixing with applause. The tension in the room had flipped entirely. What had begun as O'Reilly's attempt to humiliate his guest had morphed into his own public unraveling. Jasmine leaned forward slightly, her voice quieter now, but piercing in its precision. "You asked about my career. My career is about service. About sacrifice. About giving people hope that this system can still work for them. You may not respect it, Bill, but the people I represent do. And here's the thing. I don't need your validation, and I certainly don't need your approval. Because when history writes its story, it won't remember the insults you hurled on television. It will remember who fought for justice, and who stood in the way." The room fell silent for a moment, silent in that way that feels heavier than noise. O'Reilly opened his mouth, then closed it again, unable to summon a comeback that wouldn't sound hollow. His trademark bravado, the smirk, the domineering presence, all of it seemed to crumble under the force of her conviction. Then the silence broke. Applause roared through the studio, this time sustained, unrelenting. Audience members rose to their feet, clapping, shouting, whistling. It wasn't the polite applause of a TV segment. It was the eruption of people witnessing something raw, real, and unforgettable. Crockett sat back, calm once more, as if she hadn't just dismantled one of the most notorious media personalities on live television. O'Reilly, red-faced and visibly rattled, shuffled his notes, muttering something about moving on to the next topic. But the damage was done. The audience knew it, the viewers at home knew it, and, most painfully, Bill O'Reilly knew it. What lingered wasn't just the clash of personalities, it was the clarity of contrast. On one side, a man who built his empire on insult, on provocation, on cutting people down for the sake of spectacle. On the other, a woman whose career was forged in the fires of service, whose every word carried the weight of lived conviction. As the cameras eventually cut to commercial, O'Reilly avoided eye contact. Scribbling on his papers, Jasmine Crockett, however, simply straightened her posture, adjusted her microphone, and smiled faintly as the audience continued to cheer her on. By the time the segment ended and the credits rolled, social media was already ablaze. Clips of her response were spreading at lightning speed, shared, reposted, and dissected. Headlines began popping up within the hour. Crockett schools O'Reilly on live TV. Bill O'Reilly's insult backfires spectacularly. Congresswoman leaves studio audience speechless. For O'Reilly, it was supposed to be another routine segment, another moment to remind his viewers of his dominance. Instead, it became a turning point, a cautionary tale of underestimating someone whose strength came not from theatrics, but from truth. For Crockett, it wasn't about winning a debate. It wasn't about viral clips or applause. It was about something much simpler, much deeper. The chance to remind everyone watching that leadership isn't measured by how loud you can shout, but by how deeply you can serve. And for the audience, those in the studio, those watching at home, those sharing the clip online, it was one of those rare moments when politics, media, and spectacle collided to reveal something undeniably human. In that studio, for those minutes, truth cut through noise. Service outshone insult, and a single quote, delivered with conviction, left everyone speechless.